Okay. Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I'm Rita Choi, founder of Asia HRM. I'm very delighted to be here as your host for today's session. We are here to explore a topic that is shaping the future of every organization: sustainability. Most leaders today agreed that sustainability matters, but as the session highlights so clearly, far fewer know how to translate sustainability goals into everyday business decisions. And that is exactly why today's conversation is so important. Sustainability is no longer something that lives in ESG reports or annual disclosures. It now influences investment decisions, talent strategies, supply chain resilience, customer expectations, and even leadership accountability. Today, we are going to unpack what that shift really means for leaders and organizations. Before we begin, I invite you to listen with two lenses: your organization today, where sustainability sits, and how decisions are made, and where the gaps might be. How about the lens of being the role of a leader? How you can help translate sustainability from intention into action. This session is designed to be practical, reflective, and relevant to the decisions that you make every day. Now, it's really my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today's session. Spencer Liu, founder and managing director of Riverwood Climate Solutions. Spencer is a climate-focused venture builder, advisor, and strategist. As the founder and managing director of her current company, he advises corporations and startups across Asia on strategy and business building in the climate space. He has worked with over 30 organizations across industrials, transportation, energy, and private equity, and advised on multiple business building efforts in batteries, hydrogen, sustainable fuels, and circular economy. In addition, he is the executive director of the Climate Governance Initiative Hong Kong chapter, working with industry professionals to advance board directors' capabilities to implement the core principles of climate governance in their organizations. Prior to his current roles, Spencer spent 8 years in McKinsey, where he co-led the sustainability and green business building service lines in Greater China as an associate partner. He has a CFA charter holder, CESGA holder, and LEED LEED Green Associate. Before we welcome Spencer, I would love every one of you just to say hi to us and mention where you are from. And just feel free to put your questions in the comment box. And we are going to have the presentation prepared by Spencer and then followed by Q&A. Are you all ready for it? Okay, Spencer, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rita, for the warm introduction. Hi, everyone. This is Spencer. So today we're going to talk a little bit more about how sustainability embedded leadership is being demonstrated in different organizations and what it's the people and HR functions role in ensuring sustainability is being embedded into business decisions. So for today's discussion, we're going to break it down into three parts. First, we'll talk a little bit about why sustainability has become a leadership issue. I know a lot of you may be thinking about sustainability as something that is kind of peripheral or adjacent to the main business, but for leaders in the business space, they are already starting to see that sustainability has become a more core topic to companies' survival as well as as longevity. So we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about that, and then we'll share a little bit of reflections between myself and Rita, and then we'll move to talk a little bit about how the embedded decisions across functions are being implemented in various companies. And then lastly, we'll also share more about how to how your actions can influence the company's own sustainability agenda, and how do we build sustainability ready people systems. So overall, we'll take maybe around 30 to 35 minutes on discussing these topics, and then we'll leave time for questions along the way. So first, I want to point you towards what sustainability was and now how what sustainability can be today. So if you think about businesses maybe 10, 15 years ago, sustainability was in the realm of CSR, corporate responsibility, and was never was seldom a topic that was brought up to even the CSR agenda. At the time, sustainability was not as prominent as a topic, was kind of debated as if this is an issue that is a belief, not a fact. And as such, a lot of the times, how people treated sustainability was that this is an optional topic at best, or this is a topic to be debated whether corporates need them. But I think the mentality has changed over the years. Not only at the beginning of this decade, a lot of countries as well as organizations have committed to their climate or sustainability related targets, short term and long term. Um, we also see that we are moving away from just having sustainability as a reporting obligation. I know a lot of times, when people think about sustainability and ESG, the report always pop up at the top of their heads. But I see that a lot of corporates right now are also looking beyond the reporting itself. They are asking questions about, because sustainability, based on scientific facts, we're seeing that is there's an undeniable trend of climate changes. How how we as a corporate address sustainability through our own initiatives as a responsible corporate, as well as how we think about the business model is going to change because of sustainability as a megatrend in itself. A lot of companies are seeing that this has become a strategic business driver, and that for the initiatives and for the goals to be achieved, this is a company-wide, corporate-wide action that requires all functions and leadership to be embedded into making things happen with regards to their own sustainability and ESG targets. It is also a potential source of competitive advantage. For example, when we talk about, let's say, tech manufacturing supply chain, because a lot of the tech buyers, they are the large internet companies or the tech companies. They are also asking for their suppliers to be producing at a certain level of carbon intensity or lower, or they need to make their product emissions a lot lower than what they used to be before. The ability for these tech manufacturers to be able to source green resources, or let's say renewables, to be able to facilitate their manufacturing process, could become systematically a source for them to compete in the market, not only on price. So we do see that this has become increasingly a competitive requirement to be able to achieve a certain level of sort of ESG performance for the company and for the products. And also, when done well, it could become a sustainable competitive advantage versus their competitors. This is also a this is also central to investor and talent decisions, as investors and talents are increasingly asking for such um, requirements for the companies to abide by. And we see that like these different influences are shaping sustainability to become a topic that is core to every business. And if we break down the stakeholder influence more, we talked about customers. We mentioned about investors, but then from the suppliers, regulators, employees' perspective, they are also equally important and equally influencing how corporates behave when it comes to sustainability-related decisions. For example, on the regulation side, for Hong Kong, for example, we're already seeing that ISSB related disclosures are gradually being mandated for various like listed companies in Hong Kong. And then for employees, we also see that for the newer generation, because they will be experiencing more of the adverse effect from climate change in their lifetime, right? Given that we have already warmed up the earth for more than like 1.3 degrees Celsius over the pre-industrial periods, some of the adverse impacts from climate change are already locked in, and they would be naturally incentivized to think about, okay, am I working in a company that is doing something that is actively harming the earth and the future? So we do see that we do see empirical evidence that like Gen Z and potentially Gen Alpha people, they would care about more about who they work for and who they work with, whether they are doing anything that could be potentially harmful, or whether they are contributing anything positive to the environment, to the society, and so on. So to a corporate, it means that in order to address these stakeholder expectations, corporates will also need to step up. And this is not only from an expectation perspective or from a risk perspective how corporates should manage themselves, but climate transition in particular, as a subset of the ESG domain, it's in itself a huge multi-trillion dollar opportunity. So prior McKinsey and Company research has stated that by 2030, like the different climate transition opportunities could create a more than $10 trillion of revenue pool for the world by 2030. So what does this include? For example, when it comes to the built environment, we talk about efficiency measures, green building technologies, smart city sort of planning, smart city design. Like these are all potential opportunities that are standalone business opportunities that can be pursued. For energy systems, clearly renewables, energy efficiency, energy storage would be interesting. For transportation, you've already heard that like EVs have been taking a big share and have rapidly grown over the past decade. Food and agriculture, how do you ensure that the farming process is more efficient? How do you prevent waste from being massively produced? And so on and so forth. Like you see that these 10 different tracks that we've shown on this page here each represent a potentially $1 trillion opportunity globally. And for companies that are working to grow and are working to provide economic value to their stakeholders, these are actual opportunities that they can pursue. So it's not only that it is something that companies should be doing out of goodwill, but companies should also be thinking about this from a pure economic perspective. So let me pause here on part one and see if there are any reflections.
Hmm. So Spencer, can I have a question for you?
Sure.
Okay, so what is the single biggest leadership shift, mindset shift, right? From what we call as reporting to being a strategic advantage for sustainability. What is the biggest leadership shift organizations must make to move sustainability from compliance to truly strategic advantage? What would be the single biggest shift? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Rita. I personally believe the shift it's coming from risk avoidance to value creation. Um, and it is harder to make than it sounds because the compliance reflex, as we mentioned, is deeply embedded in how most large organizations operate.
Mm.
So when sustainability enters a business, they typically serve as a support function, which it typically does. So it comes as if it is something to be managed, to be contained, to be disclosed. So the mental model around this is more defensive. What do we do to avoid penalty, to avoid litigation, to avoid reputational damage? And that framing shapes everything that follows. It determines which team owns the agenda, how much resource it receives, whether sustainability is like the sort of holding box for everything that like the rest of our organization do not want to deal with when it comes to this topic, what questions the board asks, how ambitious the targets are, etc. So the organizations I've seen that genuinely move to like the strategic value creation piece, um, they behave quite differently. For example, I recently delivered a board training in a commercial bank in Hong Kong. So their questions are not about what must we comply with, but it's more about what opportunities and the sustainability transition has made possible for us. So this is a completely different conversation, right? It opens up questions about which markets will grow, which customer needs will evolve, what competitors will react, and which capabilities we should be building now that could be scarce later. So the concrete expression of this shift is where sustainability sits in strategic planning. So in compliance mode organizations, sustainability strategy is written after the business strategy is a layer applied on top. But if they are genuinely strategic about it, sustainability is a lens applied during the strategy formation. It is part of the strategy. And the leaders who have made that shift will talk about sustainability the way they talk about the AI transformation. It's not a constraint on the business, but as a structural megatrend or force that will determine who is going to win in the long term. So at the core, the shift is stop asking how much sustainability can we afford, but start asking how much competitive resilience are we leaving on the table if we move too slowly in the space.
Thank you, Spencer. While you're explaining about this mindset shift, right? I have this fixed mindset and growth mindset appearing in my mind. I just thought that nowadays, if we really want to see sustainability as an opportunity, we need to be equipped with a growth mindset. So they will always think of opportunities, just what your client asked you, right? What sort of opportunity that sustainability can create for them so that it will become their strategic advantage. Very nice. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Yeah. So with that, maybe let's move to the second section. This will be a relatively short one. We'll talk a little bit about what sustainability embedded decisions would look like in action, how is it being done in practice. So there are five sort of main pieces when it comes to sustainability embedded decision framework. It is intentional that I did not include sustainability as a department here for the reasons that like Rita and I discussed about, right? Is not like sustainability is not one department's responsibility, but it's across the whole organization, even if you have a own sustainability team. So um, from strategy to governance, like there are different decisions that need to be made. For example, when it comes to strategy, the sustainability embedded decision is like how based on how we think about the long-term climate or sustainability related trends are going to operate, what are the risks and opportunities that the business will face in the next like 3, 5, 10 years, and as such what actions, what revenue pools, what sort of swim lanes the company should be picking in the long term. And noting that usually when it comes to strategic successes, 80% of the success comes from you selecting the right industry, right sectors, right swim lanes, and then 20% is more about the execution. And then the other piece is like, okay, if there are risks that needs to be actively managed, like how do we think about this risk will proliferate, how it will evolve based on different scenarios, how would how are we going to maintain this like shareholder value in the longer term? Like these are all strategy related domain questions or decisions that needs to be made. And then let's say if we look in the finance, then from finance, it is about capital allocation. How do you allocate the capital to the right place? That is tied up to the right strategy. How do we also integrate our ESG considerations into allocating these capital? And then like from a more technical perspective, like what do we do about like green finance? How do we set up an internal carbon pricing system so that like we can internalize the responsibility of like carbon emissions to the right sort of functions, the right teams, the right products. And then if we have a long-term plan about like how we uh, conduct the internal climate transition. What does the transition plan look like? What is multi-year transition budgeting? And if there are risks to be managed, how do we use like financial tools, for example, insurance, to ensure that we have an adequate level of resilience to operate even when the adverse climate impact cuts in. And of course, like disclosures and controls will be a big part of it, as like most of the companies have established. From the people side of things, of course, there's a bit on talent strategy. How do you position your employer proposition to attract the right talents? Given that a lot of them are starting to think about like ESG as a prerequisite, like how do you really make sure that you are standing out as an organization that like resonates with them? And then from a leadership perspective, because a lot of times sustainability transformations, it's it's a big change management exercise. You need to have like enough leadership capabilities and like be able to influence others to be taking the same action to be taking the right actions. And you also need to make sure that your institution, your systems, people, process are set up in the right way such that the right incentive and incentivization framework functions. So how do you build out these framework and capabilities around making sure this change management is successful will be crucial. And noting that, like based on empirical evidence that consulting firms see, right, 70% of the transformations, corporate transformations fail, but a lot of times it's really about the failure coming from implementation, and the implementation failure comes from people not having the right sort of objective or right alignment of objectives based on the how the incentivization model looks like. So this will be a big sort of key point in HR.
Spencer.
Okay. And then next we move to operations. So operations is everything about like your what you do as a company on a day-to-day basis, right? So like how do you practically make your operations more efficient, or how do you really decarbonize your operations and supply chain? How do you apply circular concepts into your product design, your product building, your users life cycle? And how do you also consider nature and biodiversity into your operational practices? These are all decisions relevant for operation side. And from a governance side, this is an extension to the incentivization discussion we had, right? So board accountability, like on sustainability, is crucial. How in executives pay are linked to ESG metrics are also critical, so that people are do not say one thing but then do other things because of how they're incentivized. And then as a board, there's also an interesting angle on discussing or deciding on what guiding principles will help them drive trade-offs when it comes to decisions where maybe short-term business incentives could be at odds with long-term sustainability and resilience benefits. So a lot of times it could be ranging from like, oh, do I invest in this capability to be building, say, more sustainable finance products. In the short term, the demand may not be as high, and you need to invest in some people to be really building this capability internally. But then the longer term, like there will be a potential business benefit. Like, so what guiding principles will help you drive, like what is sort of the exact pathway in the spectrum you should take, and the board is crucial in like getting these guiding principles uh, derived, as well as like being consistently applied across the organization, such that like the pace and the rationale of every sort of sustainability and better decision, it's consistent and not flip-flopped around.
Mm.
So yeah, let me pause here for other reflections. This is a very sort of decision heavy slide, so we'd love to go to a pause and see if there are any thoughts or questions.
Spencer, I have a question here. Okay,
Mhm.
about this section. Yeah. So across strategy, people, operations, finance, and governance, which domain most often becomes the bottleneck when embedding sustainability into real business decisions, and why?
So to this question, I would say it's the overall governance and incentivization. Um, Based on like building on what I mentioned earlier, right? Like a lot of times, companies do not achieve their intended goals for structural reasons. Um, because like most of the time, like say, um, sustainability costs and benefits were either invisible or treated as externalities. So how do you really like sort of build that, um, sort of build those factors back into your decision making framework, and how do you guide the different departments in the organization to work towards factoring in these externalities into the internal decision making will be key. And without the right governance framework, um,
Mm.
naturally like departments would be like, yeah, why do I want to take on more responsibilities than I already have? Every
Mhm.
department will say I've been already doing 150% of what I do. Like, do I need to take on this further? So in a way, like this needs to come from top down. And I've seen leadership teams with genuine conviction get consistently outmaneuvered by um, processes or incentivization process that are never redesigned to accommodate a sustainability lens. So until like we figure out a way that like the company or the business are working on a concerted basis towards these goals, I would say that the job is not done. So I would think, among all these functions, like the governance will be the first thing to be talked about, and it has been underaddressed over the years.
Mm. Okay, governance, right?
Mhm.
Okay, yeah, we understand that governance is a big topic, but I think it's good to know that governance is the domain that we have to deal with first in order to embed sustainability into the real business decisions. Hmm, very nice. Thank you, Spencer, for the insights.
Thank you, Rita. So with that, let's move to the last portion, which is about how your actions matter. So I know that today most of you are coming from like a people and HR sort of expertise. So from what I see, people and HR functions have six key levers for enabling us a company to become more sustainability ready? The first piece is about board and leadership development. So, of course, like embedding sustainability into board induction, leadership framework, executive development, and competency models. We've talked quite a lot about it, like previously already, about incentivization, making sure that they are in good position and in good knowledge and capabilities to be making these decisions will be critical. Second piece will be on culture and change management. So sustainability is a cross-functional change agenda. So HR, it serves as a sort of a facilitator for these kind of cultural shift and making sure that there's an organization culture that feels safe to be pushing for sustainability related actions, like to have leadership model the behaviors for the teams to be taking actions, and then how do they sort of manage internal resistance and pushback? How are we able to collaboratively come to a conclusion to move forward? I think these are big cultural elements that would definitely help pushing or accelerating sustainability initiatives forward. Incentives and performance, like so not only on the leadership level but also on the department teams level, how are they like factoring in ESG considerations into their scorecards, would be also quite relevant. Learning and capability building, I have the privilege of like doing a lot of corporate workshops and board workshops and training around sustainability, and I definitely see that this is still an area that is still under addressed when it comes to sustainability skills. In recent years, I believe that most of the discussions have gone to AI, but at the same time, like this topic, it's a very long-term topic, and I feel like the literacy for people to be understanding this topic on a deeper basis. For example, understanding how ESG is being different from like sustainability, different from being carbon, climate, like how they're being different. Like it already facilitates such a more common language for people in the organization to be working towards a sustainability related goals, right? So this capability building is definitely crucial and critical. And then there's this the next part is about like recruitment and employer branding. How do we like align and have our employer proposition resonate with talents will be another key. Workforce and succession planning. So how do we anticipate roles the transition creates, identifies green skills gaps, integrate sustainability into succession planning for critical leadership roles will be important. I think one other thing from my sort of climate governance hat, I observe is that a lot of times corporate boards, because they need like some sort of ESG and sustainability committee, especially for Hong Kong listed companies already, they do have these type of roles. But at the same time, like the talent pipeline that gets filled into these roles um, are still kind of nascent. We do see that a lot of times, like people are posted into these roles because they are already in board positions. They know a little bit about sustainability, and then they become the representative of this topic. And so like having really people who have accumulated expertise into these sustainability committee positions would be quite important for the long term sort of healthiness of the board. So, and as we talk about like capabilities and skills that are essential for sustainability ready leadership, right? I think about it as like a few six things. One, systems thinking. Most of the time, like sustainability practitioners, like they always get criticized because like they think about uh, optimizing on sustainability is the only objective they should care about in the world. But of course, like even when we talk about climate here, sometimes good climate decisions may lead to negative impact from a social perspective or from a sort of fairness perspective. Like, so how do we think about what is the optimal path that all these equally valid considerations gets addressed? It's is a key sustainability leadership skill. Like you don't only talk about sustainability, you factor in sustainability in the context of how the world works. I think that would be a key skill. Sustainability literacy, well, definitely, like that is like if you're specializing in a sustainability role, you will need to know those. Um, how do you embed the decisions? How do you apply the sustainability lens into every sort of business decision? Holding yourself and others accountable for the outcomes would be another thing. And a lot of that, a lot of times, it involves influencing without authority, because you, if you're a sustainability practitioner, it's more likely than not you're working with the other departments as peers. So like without that sort of dotted line or solid line relationship, how do you actually move others to be doing the things that you want to do? Like incentivization is one part, influencing is the other part. So that also leads to how do you navigate the stakeholder environment internally and externally? How do you engage investors, board, regulators, employees, communities on the sustainability expectations? How do you manage tensions? How do you make sure that discussions are productive? So these are all soft skills that you can see for any sort of transformation and change management role. Sustainability is all about change management. So leading to my next point about change championship, like how do you navigate internal resistance? How do you lead transformation? And then how do you like learn from like the latest science policies and practice as they also evolve so quickly, and how you bring that back into the organization will be some key skills that we want to talk about here. So in a way, there's you can also already like run a quick self-assessment as to where your company is and how you think about like how you can move this agenda forward as a people and HR leader. So reactive businesses, they take sustainability as a compliance topic. It's ad hoc. The board is not engaged. There's no top management buy-in. But if you move to the right hand side, for fully embedded sustainability and fully sustainability embedded organizations, sustainability is at the core of business strategy. Decisions are coming from top down and is clearly cascaded into the organization. Incentivization frameworks are right. External reporting is credible. And then the culture shift is also being felt within the organization. So some questions you can ask about like what can we do to move forward, right? Um, for example, how are board members and leadership receiving structured sustainability education? Are ESG related KPIs included in your executive and senior leader scorecards? Is sustainability a factor in your talent acquisition process? Does your learning and development framework include sustainability literacy at different levels? Is there a sort of cross-functional ESG steering mechanism? Whether it's like an actual task force or an actual organization, it doesn't matter. Like, are these functions talking with each other when it comes to sustainability actions? And can you measure whether sustainability behaviors are truthful, or they're being impactful? Like how do you measure that type of impact from sustainability? Would be another question you can ask within your own organization, and sort of start the diagnostic from there. So there are also other sort of example initiatives for people in HR functions that we can do here. There are quite a lot of points here. I'm not going to go through all of them, but it broadly ranges from like building capabilities within the organization, embedding sustainability into your management system, and shaping the talent and culture um, aspects of the business would be some directional ideas that you can think about on what we could further accelerate within the organization. So, in terms of takeaways, like five things to take with you. One, sustainability is a strategic leadership issue and not just a functional responsibility. The forces are converging. Um, Pressure from different stakeholders are moving in the same direction, despite in these 2 years, you're hearing a lot more sort of potential pushback. But I would consider them as short-term ebbs and flows. As you feel more about like adverse impact from climate change in the world, this conversation is not going to go away. Thirdly, sustainability embedded decisions require trade-offs. Usually, like the trade-offs come in the form of short-term pressures versus long-term resilience, and leaders and boards will need to apply a consistent set of principles to guide actions. people and HR functions as multiple levers to drive the sustainability transformation, and small deliberate actions in the right direction compound faster than waiting for a comprehensive program. This is something that I would like to bring up as my last point, because we talked about a lot of different initiatives that we can do. Um, as with every agile organization, like sometimes it's better to just do something and then sort of adjust from there than to wait for every condition to be right to be taking actions. And I think because of how time sensitive the topic of climate change is, when it comes to climate related actions, there's no time to wait. Definitely move towards that direction first, and making small, thoughtful, deliberate actions so that it gets to a tipping point where like the company will see momentum of like going into this direction more fully. So with that, let me also pause here to see if there are any reflections. I also see there are a couple questions and comments. I would love to be able to address them at this, but let me pause here to see if Rita has any
Yeah.
suggestions on where we start.
Thank you, Spencer. We do have a few questions here. Let me take a look. Okay, so a question here: how would executive teams redesign governance, incentives, and KPIs so that sustainability becomes a natural part of every strategic choice rather than an afterthought? Very good question.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So, from a climate governance perspective, what people usually advocate for is for ESG components, like not only on climate, right? I know I've been talking about climate a lot because that is the topic I specialize on, but like for environmental, social, or governance related KPIs, it can consist of maybe 10 to 20% of executive compensation. I think that would be a sort of good initial ballpark as to thinking about how we weigh ESG factors into executive scorecards and compensation. So there are also some other resources that you can refer to. For example, the World Economic Forum has rolled out a refreshment actually of this like guiding principles for climate and nature governance earlier this year. So they also have very practical guidance as to thinking about like how boards can drive like executive teams to be aligning their incentives towards the same actions. And usually, like when we talk about incentive design, like it, even though it's meticulous, but we don't want to over engineer. So like if the setup is done correctly from the top, and there's like a logical cascading process when it comes to these incentives and KPIs, typically that should do 80% of the job.
Mm, very nice KPI, right? That is a KPI. Okay, another question here. In an era of regulatory pressure, stakeholder demands, and climate risks, what does successful embedded leadership look like in practice for driving sustainable transformation?
Yeah. I think how successful embedded leadership looks like can be exemplified by how leadership team ask questions. For example, when it
Mm,
comes to the topic of talent acquisition, like you would naturally be thinking about, oh, like for us to be an employer of choice for, say, for example, the Generation Z, um, like Gen Z people, they do care about, like, as a norm, they do care about sustainability. They do care about like working with a purpose. How do we embed that into our employer positioning? How do we embed it into our, say, recruitment process, into a talent development process? Like, so this is an example of how sustainability is embedded into like people and HR related decision. That's an aspect of it, right? But if these questions are never being brought up in any sort of business decisions or key corporate decisions, then it means that this mindset is not being really reflected on in practice. So I think the quality of the questions or the directions of the questions being asked when it comes to business decisions is a good indicator of whether we're there yet.
I love that, the quality of question that we ask, right? Yeah, very nice. Actually, we are now towards the end of the session. Spencer, any closing remarks for us?
Yeah, and thank you so much for your participation and like all the great discussions, great questions that we've received over the course of these 45 minutes. So would love to stay connected. So on the screen, you can see we happy to be connected on LinkedIn personally, but you can also follow my company Riverwood Climate Solutions, as well as the Climate Governance Initiative Hong Kong chapter, where we have quite a lot of plans coming up for the Hong Kong Green Week in September. So happy to share more details if needed. And if in any case you're looking for sort of external support when it comes to how do you build internal capabilities on sustainability, always happy to have a chat.
Yeah, contact Spencer. Yeah. So as we wrap up, I want to leave you with this thought. Sustainability is not a department, it's not a report, it's not a side initiative. It's a leadership mindset and a governance responsibility. When sustainability becomes part of everyday decisions, organizations become more resilient, more trusted, and more future ready. Thank you again to Spencer for the wonderful session and all the insights that you share with us. And thank you all for being part of this important conversation. And have a wonderful afternoon to every one of you. Thank you so much and see you next time. We'll be seeing you the week after. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.